This video has been brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends. Go to raidshadowlegends.gov.edu/Mr.Z for your free holiday sweater DLC. Please help bring this scantily clothed young woman some warmth for the holidays. Hey, geometry students. In this lesson, we are going to be learning about solids. This is going to be a 2-video lesson. There's a lot of terms, so buckle up. You're going to have to learn a lot of different technical ways to identify different types of solids in geometry. And the first word is the most general of all of the terms we're going to learn. We're going to learn what a polyhedron is first. A polyhedron is a closed three-dimensional figure formed by 4 or more polygons that intersect only at their edges. Now, we're going to learn about polyhedrons as opposed to some other shapes that would not be considered polyhedrons. Here's a polyhedron along with 3 other shapes that are not polyhedrons: a cone, a cylinder, and a sphere. Now, what makes a polyhedron so special in geometry as opposed to these other 3-dimensional shapes, solids? Well, here's what it is. A cone is a 3D figure with a circular base and a curved lateral surface. That means that as you go up, it doesn't have sides, right? It doesn't actually have polygons on the sides. It's just this curved circular surface all the way up. And as you go up, the circle around gets smaller and smaller until you get to a point on the top. That's a cone. Why is it not a polyhedron? Because it's not made of polygons. Okay, neither the base nor the sides are made of polygons. A cylinder is a 3D figure with a parallel circle base and top. Okay, so we have a parallel circle, 2 parallel circles here at the bottom and here at the top, and a curved lateral surface to connect them. In other words, the sides of this are also, like if I were to cut this at any point, it would also be a circle. That is a cylinder. A sphere is a set of points in space that are a fixed distance away from a given point, the center. And just like the other shapes, the cone and the cylinder, if I were just to cut this horizontally anywhere, the cut would be a circular shape. Okay, so these 3 things, the cylinder, cone, and sphere, have in common that they're all based on a circle, not a polygon. Okay, a circle is not a polygon. Now we can start talking about polyhedrons in a little bit more depth, the parts of polyhedrons. You are going to have to be able to identify a cone, a cylinder, and a sphere, and make sure you know the definitions. They are not polyhedrons. Remember, a polyhedron is a closed 3-dimensional figure made of polygons. All right. The face. Polyhedrons have faces. What is a face? It's one of the flat surfaces of a polyhedron. And by definition, all of the faces of a polyhedron have to be polygons. If you have a shape that's not considered a polygon, like if it has any curved sides to it, or if it's an open shape instead of a closed shape, it can't possibly be a polyhedron that you're dealing with. Polyhedrons have polygon sides known as faces. So now that you know what a face is, let's talk about a side of a polyhedron. The side of a polyhedron is a segment that is the intersection of 2 of the faces. That is the easiest way to state what the side is. We could also say that the side of a polyhedron is what connects the vertices, the adjacent vertices of a polyhedron. So you can look at this polyhedron right here. Notice that this would be one of the sides of the polyhedron that I'm circling right there. Why is it a side of a polyhedron? Well, let's just take a look here. I have a face here on top that is a polygon, a face here on the side that is a polygon, and where they intersect, I have that side. So this is the best way to define the side of a polyhedron, where 2 faces intersect each other. The diagonal of a polyhedron connects vertices of 2 different faces. So if I were to connect this vertex up here with this vertex way in the back inside the shape down on this bottom corner. Okay, so I connected this top one and then ran this line inside the polyhedron to this vertex back here, that would be a diagonal. Diagonals cannot connect vertices of the same face. So I couldn't say that from this vertex to this vertex would be a diagonal, because this line segment that I just drew is on one face of the polyhedron. It has to go from one face to a different face. The face cannot share the vertices of the diagonal. Otherwise, it's not a diagonal, it's a side. Okay? So our next term is the vertex of a 3D figure, including polyhedrons. A vertex of a 3D figure is the intersection of three or more faces, or it's really the framework of points around which the entire polyhedron is drawn. But when we say the intersection of three or more faces, it's pretty obvious what we're talking about. It's right here in our drawing. That vertex is at the intersection of the front face, the top face, and this back side face. Anywhere where you have three or more faces intersect with one another, you're going to have a vertex of your polyhedron. All right, next, we're going to talk about some specific examples of polyhedra. Notice I've named what a polyhedron is, but I haven't given you any specific names of them. The first one we're going to talk about is a prism. Okay, a prism is where geometers go if they break the law. No, a prism is a polyhedron with two parallel congruent polygonal bases connected by lateral faces that are parallelograms. Now let's just think about that. Two parallel congruent lateral polygonal bases. That would be this polyhedron right here. Notice that this square on one end is a polygon. The square on the other end is a polygon, and those squares are congruent to one another, and then we connect those by lateral faces. Now, what would happen if I took this square and I dragged it so that it was diagonal, and then I dragged this square so it was diagonal but parallel to the first one? Would I still have a prism? The answer, yes. I would still have a prism because these squares would be parallel to each other and congruent to each other, and those are the only requirements. So I could have diagonal ends of my prism. They might not be perfectly all 90 degrees like these ones are. We would call this one a square prism or even a rectangular prism to identify the type of shape that's at the base of the prism. Hey, do I have to use a square? No. If I wanted to, I could use like a pentagon with five sides at each end, as long as those pentagons were parallel to each other and congruent. Then I could connect all of the vertices of my pentagon to this corresponding vertex on the other pentagon, and I would have a pentagonal prism. Okay, that's the sort of thing that you can do with polyhedrons to make prisms. By the way, the base of a prism is one of the two congruent parallel faces that you choose to base your whole prism on. And then the lateral face is any face of a prism that is not a base. Now, prisms don't cover all of the different possible shapes of polyhedra. Here is another example of a polyhedron. This is a pyramid. Okay, you might recognize this because it looks sort of like the shape of the Great Pyramids. A pyramid is a polyhedron formed by a polygonal base. Okay, and again, that base can be any polygon. Here we have a triangle, a square. I believe this one is a hexagon, so we call this a hexagonal pyramid, a trigonal pyramid, or a square or rectangular pyramid. A polynomial at the base, and then triangular lateral faces that meet at a common vertex. The base of a pyramid is the side that does not share a common vertex. It could be a triangle or it might not be a triangle. In non triangular prisms, it's always the non triangle side that's the base. All of the other faces will be triangles. Okay, so that's really important. Actually, I should just change this language here. It's really the face. The base is the face that does not share a common vertex. And then let's see. The next thing we're going to talk about is a regular polyhedron. If something is a regular polyhedron, that means that all of its faces are congruent to one another. The only possible regular polyhedron that's a pyramid is a triangle because it has to have the same number of sides and be congruent to all of the other faces that make up our pyramid. Now let's think about this for a second. Because the faces of a pyramid have to be triangles, and the base can be any polygon, in order for a pyramid to be regular and all of the faces, including the base, are congruent, the base would have to be a triangle. And not just any triangle, we would have to be dealing with an equilateral triangle to make this work. Notice that only this has an opportunity to be a regular polyhedron. Neither this one with a square base nor this pyramid with a hexagonal base would meet the standard because the base is not the same shape as the rest of the solid. In order to be a regular polygon, a regular polyhedron, this is a high bar and not many shapes achieve this. But in order to be a regular polyhedron, all of the faces of the shape, including the base, have to be congruent. A regular pyramid, not a regular polyhedron, but when we say regular pyramid, it's a little bit easier to get across the finish line here. Regular pyramid has a base that is any regular polygon, okay? So when I say regular polyhedron, I'm referring to all the sides being congruent. But when I say regular pyramid, the base can be non-congruent, but it is going to be a regular polygon. And then the lateral faces are all congruent isosceles triangles. That means that two sides are the same. The non-base side, those two sides are the same, and then the third side is probably different. That's how you would classify pyramids and what a regular pyramid is. A regular prism has a regular base with all the faces rectangular. And remember, a square is a rectangle. So we could have a cube as a rectangular prism as well, but sort of a special case. A cube has 6 square faces and they are all congruent to each other. A cube is an example of a regular polyhedron because all of the faces are congruent to each other in a cube because all 6 square faces have to be the exact same shape. All right, that does it for this video. In the next video, we're going to do some practice problems involving solids, and we're also going to learn Euler's formula related to solids.